nè tin là lúc đi liên này nè
Luôn tới thấy cô chạy luôn chùa
nên nói cho một TV nó tía nè
tự nhiên mình chơi chú con chờ chú cái là gì đó anh chạy
In reflection, I think that one of the things that struck me the most about the Hmong people was their simple, direct relationship to the activities of their daily life. When I first arrived in the camp, I became very aware of the contrast of the world I had just walked out of and this large Hmong village I was now entering. Vinai refugee camp is located a mile or so from the Mekong River. The Mekong creates the southern border which divides Thailand and Laos. In Thailand, most of the refugee camps are located close to borders. This camp is no exception. Vinai is the oldest refugee camp remaining in Thailand. It was first opened in 1975 in response to the outpouring of Hmong refugees fleeing persecution in Laos. Some of the Hmong people that fled Laos in 1975 have been living in this camp for 15 years. Their children may very well have been born in the camp and had little, if any, exposure to the outside world. For now, this camp stands as one of the largest Hmong communities in the world, 60,000 people living in this densely populated little area. It's the largest UNHCR-administered camp in all of East and Southeast Asia, one of the many continuing byproducts of the Vietnam War. It was the beginning of the Christmas season when I flew out of San Francisco, and now in this corner of the world it's the Hmong New Year season, an event which lasts for approximately 2 weeks. It is virtually impossible to walk through the camp without hearing the sound of sacred gongs, drums, and chanting, perhaps indicating a Hmong shaman conducting a traditional ritual or healing ceremony, or a rite of passage ceremony such as a birth, marriage, or death. The Hmong believe that the world is inhabited by friendly as well as evil spirits, which can affect the well-being of the individual as well as the entire community. Illness for the Hmong is seen as the soul of the sick person attempting to leave the body, or evil spirits luring the soul from the body. Death comes to the individual if the soul fails to return. The shaman is called in to perform a ritual which involves locating the lost soul. The shaman will enter into a trance state through chanting. Sacred gongs and rattles are used to call out to the friendly spirits of the Talan to help in locating the lost soul and liberate it from the evil spirits that have taken possession. There is something about being here with the Hmong people that evokes a feeling of the deeper collective human experience. They've held intact within their families and community a translucent relationship to the world of the spirits. For the Hmong, it is an ever-present relationship that eludes time and the demarcations of history, a relationship to the world of the spirits and the infinite and mysterious forces that affect all life. The Hmong shaman plays a very critical role here in the Hmong community. The shaman is an individual, either a man or a woman, who has been given special powers by the Talan or benevolent spirits. In many cases, this power is a Talan spirit that lives within the Hmong shaman. For the Hmong, the shaman is the human bridge that communicates between the everyday world of the living Hmong and the spirit world of the Talan. Who are the Hmong people? How did they come to arrive in this hilltop setting of Thailand? Somewhere along the way, I found this Hmong creation myth. It goes something like this. A long time ago, there were two brothers who were kings. One brother was very clever and the other was very strong, with many people to support him. The two kings at last wanted to fight each other. The clever brother needed people to support him, so he turned the leaves and bamboo into people. These people made from bamboo and leaves were good, strong people. They fought well for the clever brother, and he was victorious. After the victory, the clever brother wanted to turn the people back into leaves and bamboo. However, the Hmong people said, "Please, don't change us. We are happy to be people. Let us be free to live as such." Since the Hmong people had fought bravely for the clever king, he decided to reward them by letting them remain people forever. The anthropologists and historians believe that the Hmong culture dates back to 1000 BC and has spread all the way from northern China down into Southeast Asia. Throughout their history, they have placed great value on retaining their independence. The English translation of the word Hmong is free man. It is believed that they originally inhabited the river valleys of central China. But with the expansion of the Chinese Han around 300 BC, they were forced southward into the forested mountain areas of southern China, where still to this day there are over 2 million Hmong people. Approximately 150 years ago, several hundred thousand Hmong migrated further southward and settled in small village groups in the highest mountain elevations of Southeast Asia. As is true to their character, they retained their independence and remained distinct from the other dominant cultures of the lowland areas. They lived relatively free from interference by the French colonial government. Living in the upper mountain elevations of Laos, they practiced a form of agriculture known as slash and burn farming. Traditionally, they would move their villages every 2 or 3 years to a new location, where they would once again repeat the farming cycle of burning down the existing vegetation and using the ash as fertilizer. When the land became exhausted, they would move again, rebuilding their homes, villages, communities, and establishing new farmlands. Traditionally, with their nomadic lifestyle, when a Hmong family was locating a site to construct their new home, they would bury several grains of rice in the chosen location. If all of the grains of rice remained in the same spot throughout the night, this would indicate that the location would be a favorable spot to construct their new home. If, however, one or more of the grains of rice was moved or disappeared during the night, this would indicate that according to the spirits of this particular area, this would be an unfavorable location to build their home and another place must be found. According to the Hmong's religious belief system, silver jewelry worn around the neck and wrist binds the body and prevents illness, ensuring that the life soul of the person will not escape. Traditionally, in the mountains of Laos, the Hmong craftsmen melted down silver bars and coins to make necklaces, bracelets, earrings, and rings. The jewelry denoted social status and wealth in the Hmong society. The Vietnam War and the Secret War of Laos dramatically affected the traditional lifestyle of the Hmong. Laos was a secret war to most of the world until the 1970s, but it was no secret to the Hmong. They were involved in the fighting as far back as the late 50s. For the Hmong, their participation in the war had far less to do with political ideology. It was rooted in their deep-seated devotion to retain their independence and protect their tribal territories from outside interference. The Vietnam War has taken a very heavy toll on the Hmong. Of their pre-war population living in Laos, estimates suggest that 40%, or approximately 200,000 people, remain unaccounted for. Killed either in the direct conflict during the 18 years of war, the saturation aerial bombings conducted by the U.S., the genocidal policies put into effect by the Pathet Lao, or the journey out of Laos across the Mekong into Thailand. Almost all Hmong families lost at least one or two family members. The Indochina War virtually decimated the Hmong population of Laos. Traditionally, the Hmong society was composed of approximately 20 family clans. Their clan affiliations were traced through the husband. Each clan had their own political allegiances and minor variations in religious rituals. Every clan has a chosen leader. All of the other members of the clan listen to and follow his direction. The head of the clan oversees all relationships with other clans. and has special powers that enable him to communicate with the deceased clan members during certain ceremonial rituals. The Hmong believe that the world is inhabited by friendly as well as evil spirits, which can affect the well-being of the individual as well as the entire community. The friendly spirits are called Tlan. They believe that all spirits and souls must eat and drink in order to live, and that when these spirits or souls are neglected and hungry, they may cause human beings to become ill. A very unique quality I experienced while with the Hmong community was their lack of alienation and a deeper sense of interconnection that individuals and families seem to have in relationship to the village community as a whole. For the Hmong, it was less than half a century ago that they lived in quiet isolation and had little contact with the outside world. They had virtually no relationship with the modern technological industrial society. They lived with a timeless nomadic lifestyle in which the values, traditions, and belief systems were passed on orally from one generation to the next. And now many of these Hmong families are separated from their other extended family members. Hmong people have been relocated to other countries throughout the world. Over 45,000 Hmong have been resettled to various Western countries, such as the United States, Canada, Australia, and France. Traditionally, in the daily life activities of the Hmong, rituals exist which help care for the nature spirits, house spirits, and ancestor spirits, and assist in maintaining the balance of health and harmony in the Hmong family and society.
nhau tiếng nhàng và sợ đau ho muốn đi châu chia chỉ mùa mò qua chúng chỉ có muốn tiếng chia ly sợ đừng trở ho lo sinh qua chia đời su đu cho su trung su thơ cho su cha đời vì na vì ca tí si mù trâu trâu trồng phò mù trâu đậu ra chia ly sợ đừng trở ho lo trâu lão ý chế cho chỉ có tôi lần nhiều lo nhiều dầu á xong lo ta lại xong chết tới tôi xong có lỗ lì tới lo chỉ lì lo và lo chế ôi thì chụp gì cho nó mà bé một chỗ té chân thằng tôi đã
For the Hmong, their devotion to independence and autonomy from other dominant cultures in the region has allowed their own unique cosmology to remain relatively uncontaminated. It has survived within their community with an innocent and beautiful devotion to maintaining the delicate balance between the world of the spirits and the world of the living Hmong. It goes far beyond what we in the West would refer to as religion, as it filters into so many aspects of their everyday life.
Cho nhiệt chia sang đời là một chỗ này cho một sĩ bỏ thế giờ đó còn cả chân ở cho một sĩ cho một món nào mùa hồ trốn nuôi cho một thẻ nuôi trốn đi cho một thẻ đi chỉ muốn nuôi mong đi cho một tả lia cả tàu nhỏ tả tê cả tàu sông là gió là quá hử mùa mà gió sâu má sông ra sâu sự cứ giải sự cứ trâu sâu má sông ra tí xì mù nên một tôi sát bể đây cho nó nè nên lấy cái thay đổi tàu này này trò này cho một món nào mùa hồ đó mà thế đi tàu chỉ cứ chạy chỉ cứ trâu tí xì để trả xì để còn để tuần để sầu ta một tí xì đó mà giờ là bỏ hủy cho chỉ có cho nên nhiều lo nhiều dầu giờ là bỏ hủy nè bỏ hủy tí bỏ hủy tú bỏ hủy chi cả món nào mùa hồ cả tàu nặng tàu chỉ tàu và tàu thứ đó lì thế là một lì thế lia thế cải thế này sẽ đờ cho toàn giải đút tê chờ là một lợ thế tông này sẽ đờ là nó là hồ xong lâu ta lại xong chết ở tua xong lâu ta lại sau vì sư mù này sẽ đờ là nhiều nhiều chia sẽ đờ sư phái sĩ muốn đầu sư phái sĩ muốn chờ sư phái dùng muốn nuôi cho một trận nuôi muốn đi cho một trận đi giờ chỉ muốn nuôi muốn đi cho muốn nó một hồ này tỷ thu tôi nhiều những tỷ thu đó mà chỉ cứ chạy chỉ cứ trò này sau tí xì mù này sắp tí nhiệt tí phúc tí phúc tí lông tí chia tí số tí phúc tí lông tí nhiệt tí chia tí xì chả cá lò trò cho mình tôi mình nhỏ nhau tỏ ca là bảo hữu cho ý chuyện cho chi có trò lưng bảo hữu trò lưng thì nha để cho nhau tết chè mình đi cả có tết chè nó cá hậu hú nó đỡ hậu rong cho nhau tết chè lò là chùa chùa nhẹ chùa gì cho cứ cho tí sau đấy nhau là tí là có cá có hú có rong nữa qua đó chỉ có tàu đi cho đi xe nhiều qua đó chỉ có tàu trời đi xe giá nữa xong rồi ta lại không có thể tôi ý xong có luôn thì tờ lo của tuổi 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 là những một thời như này là tết chờ tết chờ đó mà trước thay lòng cái hồ tàu tê rồi chỉ phát xong tết chờ mình lời tết chờ ai tết chờ đó tết chờ là tuổi tết chờ từ chiều trước giờ nó tàu hồ nó thì mất đi trả đi cái thì luôn thì tôi giải tôi nó thì tôi cũng tí xì nó thì số đu số đồng nó thì số tờ số tài đồng thì nó là tiền rồi trai mua đâu?
Đây rồi.
thế à chạy tới đi là mua
Hay là thật
thế là sao nhỉ mình bây giờ thống kê cho ta chơi đi
cái thân lên đó rồi nó ơi thân lên đó rồi
It was in the late 1950s that the Hmong of Laos first entered the conflict in Southeast Asia. Hmong soldiers fought on both sides of the conflict. U.S. government documents indicate that the vast majority served in a CIA-funded anti-communist force under Hmong General Vong Pao. The majority of these Hmong soldiers fought as allies of the West against the communist forces of the Pathet Lao and the North Vietnamese. The Hmong clandestine fighting forces provided the fiercest defense and made great sacrifices in furthering American policies in Indochina. During the war, the provinces in which most of the Hmong lived and considered their territories were either occupied by the Pathet Lao or the Royal Lao government. Thousands of Hmong families were forced to abandon their native mountain villages and flee to internal refugee camps established near military posts. They would no sooner build their new homes and schools than all would be burned and their livestock and agricultural products destroyed. The men fought back in an attempt to protect their villages and families, and the women were often forced to flee from village to village and ultimately to deep caves in the mountain jungles of Laos. After the communist Pathet Lao came to power in Laos in 1975, many Highland Lao people, especially the Hmong and Mien, found themselves singled out for persecution. Many were killed and thousands fled to Thailand. Others either chose to stay and fight the Pathet Lao for their territorial lands, or were unable to escape from Laos and were killed by the Pathet Lao and Vietnamese military patrols. Fearing the genocidal policies of the new government, the Hmong retreated into the jungles in order to avoid complete extermination. Facing an uncertain future, they fled across the Mekong River and arrived in Thailand, where they were screened by the Thai officials and sent to the crowded refugee camp of Vinai. Where they would go from here they had no idea. Those who had relatives in France or Australia would soon receive letters asking them to join their relatives. And so began a new era for many Hmong people as a response from Western allies to accept them for resettlement slowly began to separate families and clans and scatter their people to different continents throughout the world. To date, there have been approximately 30,000 Hmong people killed since 1975. It wasn't until 1979 that Washington acknowledged the war in Laos. Even though it involved thousands of saturation bombing raids, lasted 18 years, and produced very high casualty rates for the Hmong people. The New Year's season for the Hmong is a time of ceremony and celebration. Pavbob is a very popular courting game that is played during the Hmong New Year. It is played by men and women of marriageable age and younger children as well. The young lovers or potential suitors throw balls back and forth to each other, demonstrating their wit and cleverness through this playful exchange. Partners, each from a different clan, stand facing one another. The girl produces the ball, which she has made from wads of cloth. Serenading accompanies the tossing of the ball and may continue for hours at a time. Coming into an environment such as this, I can't help but to ask myself, how is it for these people to continue living here for so many years, raising their children and families in such a densely concentrated environment, living in a state of forced relocation, unable to continue with their age-old practice of slash-and-burn farming, hunting, and migrant nomadic living. In 1985, a Senate subcommittee report detailed a list of problems that existed here in Vinai: poor sanitation, absence of education, both physical and mental illness, and a high suicide rate. The report also noted that Vinai has an extremely high fertility rate, possibly reflecting a concern for survival after the war and persecution they faced in Laos. In many ways, Vinai is a refreshing contrast to the majority of other refugee camps, holding centers, and border camps located in Thailand. Up until recently, passage in and out of the camp was fairly unrestricted. Hmong people could easily leave Vinai, perhaps to shop in the neighboring town or visit relatives in other areas. The Hmong were allowed to set up and run small businesses and buy and sell a variety of goods within the camps. Fresh produce and rows of handicraft goods are for sale not only to the Hmong community, but also for the visitors that come into the camp. With the onset of camp life and the loss of Hmong men during the war, many Hmong women became widows. They directed their time toward the production of story cloths and the creation of ethnic crafts such as the pandao, or flower cloths. The markets of Vinai flourished with the weavings of the Hmong women and provided a small source of cash income for their families. Widows' shops became a common sight in the camp, and the sale and export of their weavings reached other countries where Hmong families had resettled. The Hmong refer to their brightly decorated costumes and weavings as pandao, a word which means flower cloth. The traditional designs reflect the Hmong's close relationship to the natural environment and their traditional mythology. Designs drawn from nature often reflect a deeper metaphysical meaning which relates to the Hmong's belief system. The Hmong build and play a traditional instrument known as the quij. The quij is a mouth organ with 6 free reed pipes. During the Hmong New Year festivals, the quij is played for entertainment. The quij is used by the Hmong musicians to communicate directly to the spirit world. Hmong instruments can recreate and imitate the tonality of the Hmong language, with the added enhancement of emotion and feeling expressed through the melody of the instruments. During this Hmong funeral, the quij player performs continuously. He is instructing and guiding the spirit of the deceased person who is undertaking the complex journey to the spirit world and back again. During the ceremony, the quij player executes turns and spins which lead the soul of the dead in the right direction and mislead the evil spirits trying to follow. In a traditional Hmong funeral ceremony, a spiritualist is called to perform all that is essential to ensure the deceased a safe journey into the next realm. A person is believed to have 3 souls which separate upon death. One is destined for heaven, or the abode of the dead, one remains in the grave, and one becomes re-embodied. It is a common practice among the different Hmong clans to conduct a period of exorcising the evil spirits from the dead prior to burial. While the corpse is still in the house, relatives and neighbors of the deceased person will come to console the inhabitants of the house. The corpse is usually buried in the afternoon, as the Hmong believe that the spirit of the dead person should depart as the sun sets, so that the soul will not come back. They believe that all living things have souls which return to the afterworld when they die to await reincarnation. "13 days after a person is buried, the soul of the deceased changes from a human state to a spiritual state or divine state. After this lapse of time, the family members invite the soul to join the ancestral divinity residing in the home. At the anniversary of the death a year or so later, the soul is officially established as a protective divinity among the other ancestral souls residing in the household. If this ceremony isn't held within the designated time period, the soul may harm the family because the soul cannot be reborn. In this funeral scene, this woman asked me to send a message to her family members in the West. Something rather extraordinary happened to me right at this moment. There was no longer any boundaries existing that marked the divisions of race, culture, and language. Our mortality as human beings and the suffering we experience with the loss of a loved one is a common thread that unites us all as one family and one community of people. This woman who had just lost her husband was calling out with the same language of human emotion that unites the hearts of men and women regardless of all the external differences that we often use to create divisions, separations, and elevated positions. In these few moments that I sat with her, I was no longer a stranger observing this event. It was also an integral part of who I am, living with this delicate gift of life.
Nó cứ ti tôi nó giờ còn nó giờ phải từ bỏ đi.